Tom Yungerberg, welcome back to the Right in the Head podcast. Such a pleasure to have you back again. How have you been, mate?
I've been good, man. Thank you for asking. Life just hasn't been the same since we last chatted. I've had many a night staring into my ceiling, saying, "When's he gonna call me again? When's he gonna contact me?" I have so many more things about writing that I need to discuss. It's like it scratched an itch the first time, and ever since I've been like dying to get back into it with you. And so finally, I got the email, and I was like, "We're back.
Yeah, I'm not
We're
going to lie,
back.
Tom.
We're back."
I hear this a lot from previous guests. It's something that
Yeah.
I didn't anticipate when I started the podcast, but
hmm
almost every person that's been a guest has been, why haven't you emailed again? Why have I not done part two yet?
That's
Something that
right.
I have to consider as we move forward. Just
Significant
just the power
abandonment.
of the podcast. It's been crazy. So very happy to have you back here and scratch that itch again for you. And we're going to share our top tips on screenwriting.
Yeah. It's
So
like top five. Perfect viral number. Top five.
perfect. Yeah. Tip three
Yes.
will shock you.
Number three will shock you. Number five might kill you. My fifth piece of advice, possibly lethal.
May
I can't
actually kill you.
technically, it's the only one with an asterisk by it that's not technically a tip. It is potentially lethal. Yeah, I will. Yeah, that is 100% true.
Yeah.
So just like all the
Disclaimer, follow at your own
yeah,
risk.
follow at your own risk. This is technically
Mm.
not advice, but it totally is. So we'll
The,
see. We'll
the,
see how if we're able to tap into the algorithm
we'll
with
see.
the
We'll see. We'll see if we
tips.
can shock YouTube enough to get
Mhm.
virality. Um, The fun thing about this is that we don't know each other's top tips for screenwriting. So we may have written down five of the exact same ones, in
Mhm.
which case this could be a fairly short episode. We won't
Right.
know until we dive in. So, as you are the guest of honor, I'm going to
Sure.
throw it over to you. What is your, by the way, disclaimer,
Mhm.
genuine disclaimer, these probably won't be in any kind of order of importance. And I don't
Right.
think, tell me if I'm wrong here, Tom, but I don't think
Sure.
either you or me is claiming to be an absolute expert at this. It's just our
Uh,
opinion, right?
I'm pretty sure you and me are the kings of writing. I'm pretty sure that our opinion is law, and if you don't follow these instructions, bad stuff's going to happen to you and maybe even your loved ones.
And that's
So,
that's based on the ludicrous number of scripts that we've sold
of
professionally.
course, absolutely. No, we're kidding around, of course. Yeah, we're not experts. This is stuff that I've mulled over. This is stuff that I'm sure you've mulled over, and it's been successful for me. It's stuff that I've certainly thought about when I was putting together my five things. And I was like, I know that you can Google pieces of advice. You can, and you'll see some like Screencraft or ISA stuff that's like really, really helpful. And it's like common sense sort of advice. One of the things that I wanted to do with mine is I wanted to make it a little bit more peculiar, tiny things that maybe you hadn't thought about that are a little bit outside the box, maybe a little bit weird that could help get the creative juices flowing or get your writing more consistent. But once again, considering the fact that it is so, it's a collection of oddities on my part. This certainly might not work for anybody. So there is the disclaimer that like
There it
maybe I don't
is.
know what I'm talking about at all. Maybe I am not
But
the
we're
king
going to
of
have
writing.
fun with it and
We're just
maybe help
jesters,
some
we're not
people.
kings. Yeah.
Exactly. Welcome to the courtyard. Okay.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what is your weird and wonderful tip number one for screenwriters?
Okay. So this is going to sound a little bit weird. I am going to start off with this one. This is in no particular order, but I find this to be very creatively rewarding. And the first step that I'm going to say here might sound a little bit weird, but play with maps. Literally maps. So one of the best like creative sparks that I get, and I used to love this when I was a kid, is if I was reading an adventure book that came with like a map of the land. I don't know why, but it would be like one of the best like ignitions for imagination that I could possibly get. It was like jump starting my mind, where if I could see the path that the characters are traveling on and I could follow them around on this adventure, all of a sudden the imagery in my mind of where they were going, where they were coming from would just be so much more vivid. I don't know why, but And it's the same thing with some of my friends. I got a buddy who's got like maps all over his wall. He's got maps of like Mordor. He's got maps of like solar systems from like Star Trek. But even when it comes to a screenplay, you could have like a one location screenplay, a single room, like a Saw or like a Marriage Story or something like that. But even like drawing the blueprints of the room or the house, and this piece of furniture is over here, and this is over here, and there's a stain on this wall, and like figuring out the layout of the room. When you just start to figure out how big is the space that I'm playing in, what are the details and the things that fill it, like you're going to have, or at least for me, it really brings to life in the imagination all the wonderful things that you can do to fill that space. And then all of a sudden it makes like the descriptive passages in the screenplay that you're working on all the easier to write. So I love maps. I do it when I'm writing like a stage play or when I'm like trying to like of course like set up the set or when I'm working on like a very specific curious sort of a room, especially if there's anything mental about it, if it's a little, if there's a little puzzly sort of like Saw as I alluded to earlier. Maps are just one of my favorite ways to, if you are feeling stuck or if you are feeling like you're always hitting a wall when it comes to describing the environment, getting the environment down, and really making it crystal clear for the reader, then I love maps. I love blueprints. I love that sort of stuff.
I
So,
love it. That is such a great one to kick this conversation off. Let me just share one personal experience with this. We'll rejoin this thrilling conversation with Tom and our top screenwriting tips in just a moment. Firstly, leave us a comment. What do you think of the tips so far? Do you have any tips that you'd like to share with our screenwriting community? And if you haven't already done so, please do go ahead and subscribe to the channel to get much more content just like this. All right, back to Tom and our screenwriting tips. The very first feature-length screenplay that I wrote was an animated family comedy in the same kind of lane as a Pixar movie, and the entire finale took place at an airport. And I could not break this finale. I just couldn't get into it. And I realized it's because I don't know what the airport looks like. I don't know which corridors they're running down, or which vents they're climbing into, or where the baggage claim is, or what. And so I drew an airport as just a very rough blueprint.
my man.
And the finale came together. I was like, oh, they would come in through this one. This would be where the exit ramp would be. This would be the chute that they could go down. And I was doing it thinking, does anybody else do this? I felt weird because I was a newbie writer. And like, this isn't writing. This is drawing an airport. But it unlocked so much for me. I'm so glad to hear you say that, Tom. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's something I just love doing. I don't know why
Yeah.
ever since. Maybe I just got really into like pirates and treasure maps when I was a kid. And it
Hey,
just
didn't
sort of
we
like,
all?
I
Didn't
think
we
we all,
all?
we must have. But
Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't shake it. Like I was working on this new horror screenplay that was like, it takes place over a very specific geographic location. And so I was like, I drew like a road and I was plotting out like mile markers and landmarks that characters would pass by on this journey and how far apart things were, what that would do to the conflict, how much time there was between locations. And you sort of get an idea of like the flow of a screenplay, like how much time needs to pass by, especially if they're going from one place to another. If you're doing a road trip movie, I don't know how you can't draw a map and like have a map to really know the twists and the turns, quite literally, both on the emotional side of things, but the figurative and literal side of things, as I think that those things sort of interweave.
I love
So
it. I love it.
yeah.
That is a great practical tip. We're going to move on to tip number 2, which is going to seem like such a departure from what we were just talking about because I
Mhm.
racked my brains. And the question I love to ask myself is if I could only give a screenwriter one piece of advice, what would
Mhm.
it be? That's the sort of the way that I get into what's the essential thing.
Mm.
And it's so meta compared to that very specific thing that you just said, but I'm going to go with it anyway. It
Yeah.
was, I would phrase it as build a sustainable lifestyle. I thought about it so much, and I thought, Tom, what's the one thing that sets apart the screenwriters who make it from those that don't? And it's they've found a way to stay in the game for a really long time because it takes a really long time for most people. And I thought, okay, how am I personally going about this at the moment? Well, I look after my physical and my mental health, simple steps to make sure I'm feeling and doing okay. I look after my finances, so I typically live a bit beneath my means, so I'm not, in trouble when it comes to paying rent or anything like that. I have a good circle of friends connected to my family, so I know that I can keep living this life. And sort of built into this is I make time to write each day, which is sort of a separate thing, but it gives me this feeling like I can just keep doing this until the thing that I want to happen, the next goal I have as a writer, happens. I'm not going to suddenly have to leave LA, well, unless there's wildfires that burn down my apartment. And, shout out to anybody that's gone through that. It's absolutely tragic. Other than these disasters that we can't predict, I've put myself in a position where I can keep going. I can do 10 years like this. I'm not overly stressed. I'm not overly busy. I work hard, but not to a point where it's exhausting me. I'm not going to burn out. I've got my basic needs met. That for me is one of the biggest differences, because if you don't do that, if you're writing to try and pay rent and your apartment is on the line and their stress levels are through the roof, I think that's why most people stop writing. So summing all of that up is just build a sustainable lifestyle, because you are going to be in this for a long time. How does that resonate with you?
I mean, I think that is 100% true. I think that if anyone really needs to hear that, I would say it's sort of people on the younger end of screenwriting. I think that's totally true, because it's very tempting, I'd say, to sort of fall into the hustle and grind mindset of, as far as like, you know what, you're going to lose sleep. You're going to need to stay up. You gotta put on your grind set, and you gotta, power through night after night after night.
Right. Rise and grind, man. Rise and grind.
It's a very real thing. And that being said, I believe that there are some pieces of, applicable advice that can come from sort of like the dedication side of the grind set. There's value to it, but I think absolutely what you are saying needs to be heard, as far as making sure that you have something that is sustainable and that you can keep doing. Because if you're really into screenwriting, you probably have a part of this this is probably a huge part of your identity, And the last thing that I would want to wish on anybody is for them to be burned out on something that allows them to fulfill and be the most complete expression of who they are as a person. And it's very tragic to see something like that go away because someone got burned out, or, something happened with a relationship, or, financially, a person finds themselves in a really bad space and they just throw up their hands and they have to walk away. I think what you're saying is absolutely very, very, very important for writers to listen to, and
I love it. Yeah.
anyone to listen to. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is good advice in general. If you want to succeed at anything, it will take time, unless your goal is to become an overnight TikTok sensation based on a comment you make in a street interview. But then,
how did you know I was doing that? That was my next project. Damn it!
You're inspired by the Hawk Tour girl. Just figured you'd take a risk. That's fine if that's your strategy. I just think that's very short-lived, and most people don't then parlay that success, if you can call it that, into a long-term thing. So I wouldn't suggest planning on doing it that way. I would suggest accepting that it's a feature, not a bug, that it's going to take a long time and you need to be able to stay in the game for any career. So moving on, what is your next tip? Mr. Yungerberg, let's hear tip number 3 for this episode.
Tip number three. Tip number 3 is learn to love something before you criticize or satirize it. What I'm saying here is that I feel like there are tons of scripts, and I've seen these in all sorts of like competitions and stuff that I've, met with other writers that they work on, where, maybe they're writing from a place of frustration and anger, and they want to poke fun at something, they want to take something down, they want to write sort of a biting critical analysis of an idea or a political ideology or something, or maybe even an industry, right? And they want to write that, and they jump into it, and they do it. And then what often winds up happening, that I've seen in a lot of scripts and even in some of my earlier stuff, that the story is a little bit more shallow than you would arrive at, than you would get to, if before writing that cutting vision of insight into whatever you want to critique, if you understand the thing that you're talking about, or you're satirizing, or you're parodying, or you're criticizing, trying to understand it to the point at which you could, in another life, love it, that you could truly appreciate it, and that you could articulate its viewpoints, its strengths, and maybe where the people are coming from. And I think that this prevents a very shallow and sort of cursory glance at something. Because I feel like there's a lot of this in television. There's a lot of like, writers' rooms that might have like a certain, like, here's what we're going to say this week. This is happening in the news, and we're going to get on top of this. And I think that that's probably going to happen more often, considering, what's going on in the country right now, is that what we need isn't necessarily more opinions formed over, I would say, a cursory knowledge of what one is criticizing. I think to truly do a good parody, we should look at something like Mel Brooks, right? Mel Brooks, before writing Blazing Saddles, knew and loved the Western. You cannot parody the Western unless you love it.
You need to know what happens in Westerns. You need to know the rules, the tropes.
Exactly. And you have to know the rules, you have to know the tropes, and you have to, I would even say, respect the rules. Because if you know the rules but you hate them, you're missing the spirit of the rules. Why are they there in the first place? What were they what were they designed for, and what was it that they were looking to accomplish? It's not enough to know them. I would say you have to be able to play by them. And to play by something and to understand it and do it well, I feel like that there's almost a level of empathy that one needs to have for what one is criticizing. And that's why I think, like, that's why Blazing Saddles is legendary, is because, I think he sent it to John Wayne, and John Wayne is like, this is amazing. I wish I could be in it. I can't, but I'll be the first one in line to see it as soon as it comes out.
May not have been the best career move for Mr.
Right,
Wayne.
for him, but he loved it. I mean, it might have even been a good career move back then. I don't know. Everyone loves Blazing Saddles, but it was. So that's that. I'd say that would be my piece of advice, is for writers who are getting ready or chomping at the bit. And I did this too with one of my recent scripts. It was the log line is, you have two friends who are working at a Denny's who plan to save the life of the CEO in order to secure free breakfast food forever, because they love it. And there's a lot of stuff about business and CEOs and all of this stuff, and which is something that's pretty easy to critique. But the truth is that I love business. I love entrepreneurship. I love, like, all the financial aspects of it. I find it absolutely fascinating, and I understand its purpose and why it exists. And I think that's why I really tried. Hopefully I was successful. I would leave that to other people to decide. I was successful in bringing that into to the critique with it. So it's sort of like a mixed bag of affection but criticism, that I feel like makes it a lot easier for the message to come across palatable. And But anyways, that's number 3 from me. What do you think about that? What do you? I don't know. You're welcome to push back, by the way.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No pushback here. What it reminded me of is something outside of screenwriting, but you'll get the connection. When I was coaching people, I would deal with couples. And one of the things that I would tell them to reduce conflict, and this could be in any relationship, not just a couple,
Mhm.
If you cannot steelman the other person's perspective, you don't understand it well enough yet to argue with it.
Mm.
Like if your
Steelman
partner
is
is
the
saying
opposite of
some,
a straw man.
yes,
I see.
exactly.
Okay.
It's easy to straw man. It's easy to tear down someone's opinion. But if you
Mm.
can't yet explain their own opinion back to them in a way that makes them say, yes, you understand what I'm saying, you don't have the right yet to tear it down because you don't understand it well enough.
That's so
So
good.
step number one, if your partner says something that you disagree with, explain it back to them in a way that at least lets them know you understand what they're saying. Then you can go ahead and say, now that you know I understand you, here's why I disagree, with respect.
Hmm.
If you just skip to the part where you disagree, what are they going to feel? They're going to feel that you don't understand them.
Yeah, they don't feel heard. They feel like
Exactly.
yeah, that's good.
Exactly. So
Very
that
good.
was that can be a real unlock for people in relationships and friendships, even business relationships. You know, somebody
Hmm.
comes to you with a proposal. Again, this has happened to me from working in entrepreneurship. You don't agree with it, but you at least explain it back to that person so they know that you understand what they're getting at. And then as a follow-up, here's why that doesn't quite work, but I hear you. So anyway,
Yeah.
back to your point, if you understand the genre, if you understand and love it, I love the fact that we add love the genre. You're in a much better position to create a parody, a satire, because you're not just attacking it first. And I think people who have done that, I don't know that I could think of any examples, but it shows. It shows like you don't understand the genre. You're just attacking it,
Yeah.
and that's nowhere near as enjoyable to watch.
Hmm.
And yeah, Mel Brooks being just an amazing example of somebody that does this very, very
Yeah.
well. So yeah, fully on board with the point.
Nice. We're off to a good start. That's 3 down, 2 to go, right?
Let's see how much time we're going to keep
See, maybe
going
we'll throw
until
in a couple
we.
extras.
Yeah, maybe we might have some
I don't
bonus
know.
content here if you stick
See.
around till the end, ladies and gents.
You know?
Tip number 7 will blow your mind.
Tip
I
number
love
7.
it.
You got to keep watching. Tip number 7 will literally save your life.
If you don't do
So
tip number 7, you will fail as a screenwriter.
that's true. Guaranteed.
All jokes, all jokes. Well, my next tip. So we're going to move on to tip number 4.
Yep.
Here it is in a nutshell, and I'm just going to do the shocking YouTube thing and then pause for dramatic effect. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Be less nice. That was enough of a dramatic pause. So here's where I get this from. There's a few books out there now. One of them is called No More Mr. Nice Guy, I believe by Robert Glover. Another one called Less Nice, is it called? Or I forget the name of it. But there's this sort of collection of books that I've read over the years. Again, just coming from a coaching background, I'm very interested in these types of books.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the messages that comes through in these books that has been just transformative, either one, for me personally, be less nice. And the way that they phrase it is the opposite of being nice isn't being nasty, it's being truthful. And it points to the fact that we are all at least 50% people pleasers because that's how humanity operates. And if you're in a position where you need to ask for things and you're afraid to ask, you are severely limiting your chances of any type of success, whether that's with your relationships or your friendships or your career. So if you're tippy-toeing around and you're afraid to make the ask, you're being too nice. And here's the genius of this, Tom. Not only does it not get you to where you're going, it makes you actually a more angry person because you're not getting success. You're not seeing progress. So I could even take this back to a position of relationships again. If you're in a relationship and you're not asking for what you want because you're being nice and avoiding conflict, how do you feel in that relationship? You start to feel angry. So you're pretending to be a nice person, but you're actually not. You're feeling angry. This chasm, because it can feel like that, and just start asking for what you want in a very respectful way. You don't need to be a dick about this stuff.
No.
You actually feel like a happier person inside. And you make more progress because you're making the ask. So the reason I think this is so important for screenwriters is there's this feeling in the entertainment business that writers don't get to ask for what they want. I don't know where this comes from, but there's this thing like, executives, producers, directors, and then somewhere down here, scrapping around in the mud, writers. Not always, that's a generalization, but the number of writers I meet who are very, I don't want to say the word meek, because the original definition of that means that they are powerful on the inside but not using it externally. Thanks to Jordan Peterson for pointing that one out to me. But there's something about them that it's almost like they feel like they don't have permission to go out there and make a great career for themselves. It's kind of like they're waiting for it to come to them.
Mm-hmm.
So something that I've talked about on the podcast before, did a great episode with Zoe Hodge. She calls it doing it cringe. Do the cringe thing. Reach out to people. Make a nuisance, right? Yeah. Just be on people's radars. And again, there is a way to do this that is respectful, professional, polite even. But I think more people need to do more of that than they would need to back off and stop being so in people's faces. I think it's being less nice, being more assertive, having the courage to be rejected, to make a fool of yourself, and then to self-soothe very quickly and get up and go again.
Yeah.
I think if you can't master that, you're really hampering yourself. I love how none of these tips so far have really been about the act of screenwriting. Anyway,
the maps thing was cool.
The maps thing, but that was more drawing than writing. Yeah. But what do you think about this? The phrase "be less nice." By the way, I didn't come up with that. I got it from the books that I've read, and it's very much kind of like an attention grabbing thing. And then you realize what they're saying is be more assertive, be more honest, be more truthful. How does that land with you, Tom?
I mean, I think that is. I think that's actually really, really solid advice. I think. Here's a way that this relates directly back, I would say, to the writing journey of many, many screenwriters. The process of querying, reaching out to a manager, reaching out to agents, reaching out to people to read your screenplay that you wrote, to get eyes on it, to hopefully get representation, has often been one of the most depressing, icky things about, I would say, the pursuit of the screenwriting career, passion, whatever you want to call it. But I understand that feeling because I used to feel this way a lot. I go to like a website, or I would see that like you on IMDb Pro and you see like a manager who you think would really connect with your piece, but their email's not listed. And you think, oh my gosh, that means that they don't want anyone to contact them. And if I send them a message, they're going to blackball me and they're going to probably kill my pets. I don't know.
I could die if I send this email.
I will die. If I send this to this manager, they're going to look at this and they're going to go, who's this asshole? And they're going to
I'm going to wake up next to a horse's head in the bed.
That's right. They're going to send me and inside the horse's head is going to be your screenplay, and it's just going to have the word shit drawn on. They printed it out. You sent it through an email. They took the time to print it out and tell you suck.
They took the time to print out your whole script, go and find a horse, decapitate it, find out where you live. That's how much they hated you for sending a query email.
That's how I used to feel. I think that's how a lot of people sort of emotionally feel. They see that, a manager says does not accept unsolicited queries, or a talent agent does not accept unsolicited queries. We don't do it. I get it. Legally, they say that. Maybe that's true. They don't do it at all. But I actually think it's good practice for a writer to, if you do get an email or they have it listed, I think that should you go after somebody who doesn't have their email listed? Probably not. But like if they have, and that is the policy of most, I would say, managerial and agencies in management companies and agencies in Los Angeles, is they have a no solicitation policy. Company, they have to for legal reasons, because if they did produce something that was similar to your screenplay, they're like, oh, well, it gives them a defense, right? We didn't steal from you because we don't accept unsolicited queries, so we would have never seen your email. But I think any agent or manager will tell you that sometimes it'll be the right time of day and they'll be in the right mood and they'll just happen to get an email that comes in their inbox with an interesting log line and it works. And if it doesn't work, if they don't jive with it, they're probably just going to hit delete and they're going to move on with their day and you get to move on with yours. But what I'm commenting on that I think you're so correct about is the mindset of the writer often in that situation is, how dare I? I could not, I don't want to inconvenience this person. Literally, all they're doing is just hitting the delete button or sending you a nice email saying, hey, we can't accept unsolicited projects. Unfortunately, we had to delete your email. That's the worst I've ever gotten doing it. Am I
Right.
blackballed and am I on a hit list now? Do they have a Bitcoin contract out of my head?
Only
Maybe.
one that I know of.
No, only one. And you know what? I can live with one.
Yeah.
Two, I'd
Who
be in
doesn't
big
have it
trouble.
hit out on them these days?
That's right. So I think you're 100% correct. Like
Yeah.
asserting yourself, being willing to be seen, and taking a little bit of a risk. You're not showing up to their house, you're sending an email. So
Right.
especially as it relates to querying, I
Yeah,
say go
don't
for
show up
it.
to their house. I would say
Yeah.
that. That's an important caveat. Don't show up to their house. I tried that once. It didn't go well. The other thing that I talk about on this podcast, I've talked about this a couple of times. Well, actually, firstly, let me just say that your point about they're not going to get super offended, they just hit delete. I relate to that because what do we do when we get emails in our inbox that we don't want to read? It's not a massive moment of how are they still sending me their newsletter for this company? And you just delete
Yeah.
it or unsubscribe. It's not like offensive. But
Right.
the other thing that I wanted to come back to is you have to understand this psychology of not sending the query email. Why? Because you're afraid that you won't hear back or that they will say no. Okay. So the
Mhm.
end result that you fear the most is nothing happens. Guess what you're guaranteeing if you don't send the query email? You're
Yep.
guaranteeing the exact result that you're
Mhm.
afraid is going to happen. You're guaranteeing the nothing. So the only option is to send it and see what happens if you want to avoid worst case scenario. I don't think
Mhm.
people quite have that mentality, and I wish they did. So, all right, let's move on because I'm loving how we're trucking through these. So we've done 4, and so far they have been wildly divergent, which I love.
Yep.
Number 5, let's bring it on.
Number 5. Which of these should I choose?
I'm
Most
doing the same
practical
with my
one.
list. I can't decide which one's next.
Um, You know what I'm going to do? This one will relate to the writing practice. This one
Okay,
this one
all
will be
right.
about actually what you put on the page.
Let's bring it down to ground. Land the plane.
Okay. I would say that in screenplays, we're told always to look for conflict, look for the conflict in the moment. And I would say look for microcosms of conflict. Look for conflict in the smallest ways that it can be present on the page, even in the littlest things. And you can like heighten those to be like major inconveniences. I feel like that I've talked with, some screenwriters, younger screenwriters and screenwriters, blah. And a lot of younger folks will say, I really don't feel like anything's happening on the page, or because they have this idea that the conflict needs to be sort of like a level, like an 8 or a 9 or a 10, or nothing's happening, and that there is no in between. And to anyone who's dealing with the idea that you're looking at your script and you're feeling like there's not enough conflict in there, or you feel like that you're not getting to the major conflict fast enough, I would say look for small areas, small nuances, little tiny moments to insert conflict. I was thinking about this the other day. One of my favorite scenes in Uncut Gems, which is a terrifying movie that I love. I've only seen it once and I will never see it again because it's too stressful. But there's this scene where someone's trying to get inside of the jewelry store and the door won't open, and they're just hitting that buzzer. Everything is like there's a customer trying to talk to somebody at the same time, and it's like they're using so many smaller sources of conflict with like, you know, there's the time is slowly ticking by, and he's got to be at a certain location in order to deliver a certain item, and there's all these people that are coming in, and it's almost like you get a greater sense of conflict when you have all these little tiny things adding up, sort of a gestalt of conflict, rather than looking for and trying to lock in and hone on one big conflict, right? There's a nuclear bomb that's going to go off. Yes, that's big, that's, important. People are going to be looking at that on the page if that happens to be your plot device. A nuclear bomb is going to go off. But imagine losing your car keys like when right before the nuclear bomb's going off and you're trying to get there. Like there's so many opportunities I feel like to introduce smaller microcosms of conflict in screenplays that will make every page an excitement, an exciting experience and a joy to read.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And there's the story arc conflict, and then there's the sort of in-scene conflict. And obviously they feed into each other, but I heard this from Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Are you familiar with
she writes Fleabag?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think it was her. I think it was her who said within any scene, you could think of it as stacking up 3 different types of conflict, but sort of micro conflicts. And I think the example she gave was something along the lines of you are arguing with somebody, it's also raining, and your hair is a mess that day.
Yes. That's what I'm talking about.
So it's stuff that we all relate to, but it adds so much to that scene. Because most people would say, yes, the couple are going to argue. That's conflict. But why not throw in a rainstorm, a bad hair day, a broken umbrella that you're dealing with, some traffic, anything. It's organic and it makes the scene much more compelling. So I agree with you and Phoebe on this one. I think there's these opportunities to layer in these, you might call them like micro conflicts, I think is a good way of phrasing that, as well as this maybe meta conflict that drives the story.
Sure. And it makes total sense because if you're ever having a bad day, let's say that you're late for a really, really, really important meeting.
Or a podcast episode.
Right. Like, and anything that goes wrong is going to have a magnifying glass over it in those situations. Whereas if you're in a good mood, if I spill, a little bit of coffee on my shirt, it doesn't ruin my day or anything like that. But depending on the context of the situation, what's going on,
unless it's your wedding day,
then it's then it is absolutely heightened to an insane scale. So
I love it. Yeah. So we've done the 5. We've still got. Let me check my timing here. Do you have a hard out at our 12:30 mark?
No, I don't have a hard out. I can go for 1 or 2 more.
We have plenty of time until we reach that mark. I don't want to rush through these. I think these are great. Let's definitely move on to 6, and I think we've probably got time for 7 as well. But we'll see. Okay. We'll see. We'll see how earth-shattering number 6 is. Excellent. Honestly, I'm torn. Because I've got 2 here that I think are just so important. I can't split them. If you did one without the other, it wouldn't really work.
Yeah.
And I think they're quite obvious as well. I've said the 2 that are maybe less obvious. So one of them is, let's do this. Let me tell you what they both are. And you can tell me, you're the guest, which one you think we should do a bit more of a deep dive into. Okay. One of them, networking. There's details there that I think people are still not quite aware of. Okay. Sure. And the other one is studying the art of screenwriting. And again, there's some nuance there that I have learned along the years of doing this that I would happily share with people.
Yeah.
Which one of those is more obvious, so we probably don't need to talk about it, versus one that's, maybe we could unpack that a bit for the listeners?
It's sort of a catch here because networking is something that I would say that a lot of people are really bad at, but it's also something that a lot of people don't like talking about because they're so terrified of it and they hate it so much. And I think it does relate a lot back to your be less nice advice as far as that, like being willing to it'd be more not necessarily not nice, but more honest and more upfront and more like assertive about like, wanting to meet people and putting yourself out there and what you do. That being said, the ability to elevate one's experience as far as like studying the craft or watching films, that's pretty important too.
I have an idea. I've just said 2 of my remaining 3. How about I'm going to do a hard left turn here and just talk about the other one that I haven't even mentioned yet, and we'll just count networking and studying as that's a given. You should all be doing those 2 things.
Right.
Let's do that. because this
Okay.
third one is my final one. So I'll then be able to give you more time to talk through your tips. And I like
Okay.
this third one from me because it's not as obvious. So here we go. I
Sure.
talked about building a sustainable lifestyle. If we zoom in on that, something that has helped me no end it's creating the smaller habits within that lifestyle that connect you to your writing for more time per day. So, at the very basic level, have a writing routine. I've talked about this ad nauseum. I wake up, I do my hydration, shower, breakfast, coffee, and then 2 hours of screenwriting before the rest of the world has probably woken up because I'm an early riser. That's my
Mm.
day, every day, period. It's like a religion. That's kind of entry level habit setting. What I've been doing more and more recently is micro habits. So, when I wake up, there's about 15 minutes where I'm just pottering around doing all the stuff that I just listed. So now I wake up with my phone next to me, which I know people say, oh, don't sleep next to your phone. Look, I'm not a social media junkie. I don't use my phone for social media, so perhaps I can get away with this.
Hmm.
I pop in my AirPods and I've left myself a question about my script from the night before. So as soon as I wake up, I start recording myself talking about the answer to this question. So I get about 15 minutes of screenwriting done. It's not actual screenwriting, but it's working through one of my challenges, one of my script issues that I'm currently dealing with.
Hmm.
I start doing that again as I'm preparing lunch, as I'm preparing dinner. This is sort of the downtime where you're not really doing too much with your mind. You're physically active because you're cooking, or maybe you're walking, or maybe you're at the gym, but you could still be focusing on your script in some way. So
Hmm.
it's looking at your lifestyle and your routines that you have. How can you squeeze in more screenwriting time, even if you're not at your laptop actually writing pages? What are some ways that you can be more connected? And what I've found is that it's kind of the difference between doing a driving lesson once every week, which I did to start with, and every time you come back to it, you have to remember what you learned last week,
Hmm.
versus doing an intense course of driving 6 hours every day. That's eventually how I got my driver license. I did an intense course because you just keep drilling it into you every single day, 6 hours a day. And by the time you sit your test, you really can't forget what you've just been taught because you've been essentially brainwashed to do it the right way. I
Right.
feel like that with screenwriting. If I just did a bit per day or every few days, I would need to constantly remind myself of what my story is even about because it just wouldn't be present in my mind. So with these micro habits, what I found is it's always in my mind. I'm never too far from my story. So when I sit down to actually do my writing, the ideas are there. I've got voice notes that I can play back to myself and transcribe. So I'm making more use of my time in those kind of transitional moments.
Hmm.
That has been game changing for me. So,
That's so interesting what you say about like doing that in order to keep your script fresh in your mind. I have definitely fallen victim myself to not touching a screenplay like within like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks because something comes up or something crazy is going on, and I'm like, where am I? I don't even know what's going on in my script anymore. And like, but having and finding the smaller moments to write and be dwelling on certain issues or certain concepts within the screenplay is so valuable. I went for a walk the other day. I was like, and I was just like, all right, I'm on this walk. I'm just going to try and think about this issue that I'm facing in one of the projects I'm working on. And it's so good just to be able to do that while multitasking and dedicating time to just dwelling on the problem and trying to think of a solution. And I would say that that probably puts you closer to the characters in your story than anything you could ever do. Because if we're portraying people in our stories and we're trying to think of what happens to them in our screenplays, in your life, if something's going to hell in a handbasket, you're probably thinking about that all the time. What am I going to do about this? And so carrying your stories with you in those tasks where you're doing your dishes or you're going on a walk or you're, going out and taking your dog to the dog park, whatever it is, thinking about it in the same way that a character would dwell on the issue that they're facing in your stories puts you closer to your characters in a way that I don't think you could get any closer than them. You're spiraling and spinning on cause and conflict and dilemma in the same way that they would, if they were in real life and they
Yeah.
had these issues. So I think that there's a lot of power to what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Well,
And and
the other thing that's very similar to what you just said was there's a part of the brain, I believe it's called the reticular activating system. And it's the part of the brain that basically tells you what to pay attention to because you've programmed your own brain to pay attention to what it considers to be important. So, how this connects to this tip that I'm giving is if you're spending most of your day thinking about your script, you start to notice solutions to your script challenges in everyday events that you normally wouldn't have connected to your script because you're not thinking about it enough for your script to be quote unquote important. So the same event that you see happening out there at the dog park or at the gym or in traffic would just pass you by unnoticed. But because you've been spending so much time thinking about your character and your script, it might be like, oh, wait a second, that scene that was boring, what if it was set stuck in traffic like I am right now? Wouldn't that add some conflict? That's a good idea. So you
yeah.
start bringing in all of these life experiences because you're thinking about your script so often. It's been a real, yeah, like I said, real game changer. All right.
Awesome.
I think we've got time for one more.
All
I
right, let
want
me
to
see if
throw
I-
it back over to you, Tom, and get your final tip for the day, which puts us at 7.
That'll put us at
Yes.
7.
Seven's
is-
good. Seven's good. Marketing teaches me that people prefer odd numbers when it comes to
Yeah.
tips
3,
and
5,
steps.
7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 7 tips this episode will be called.
7 tips.
Oh, I love
God.
the alliteration as well. 7
Well, this is
screenwriting.
some
Yeah.
serious tip inflation going on right here. We went from 5 to 6 to 7. I'm pretty sure one of the 6, we had 2 little tiny ones in there too. We were thinking about combining both of them. People
That's
are getting a lot
true.
of bang for their buck.
Technically,
So
there's
this is good.
9 screenwriting tips. Yeah.
This is good. All right. This is, we can put this one in here or we can edit this out if we need to, because I'm not sure how obvious it is. I would say this: explore a new medium. Explore a new medium. I think when you are writing screenplays, you're working on screenplays or pilots. It's very tempting to make that all the media that one consumes, because I'm a firm believer in that the media that we consume can inspire us. It's a form of probably teaching. You mentioned earlier one of the possible steps that you were throwing out was how to study the craft, how to do that. And I think a lot of folks would say that we need to watch good films, we need to watch bad films, we need to watch films. If you're writing films, I would say if you're stuck or you want to learn sort of a new approach to storytelling and bring some of the tenets and lessons that you can learn from it, switch up your mediums. I wrote a picture book. Try writing a picture book for a different audience, or try writing I teach a creative writing class. So this is what I do: is I'm constantly switching mediums with like the kids that I work with, and I see like a lot of the kids bringing lessons that they learn from one of our other units. I'm working with them on a choose your own adventure like story, which is something that like newer kids, like these kids are like in 4th or 5th grade. We had those back in like the 90s where you go to the library, you check out like flip to page 15. Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
you died. Your head
Yep.
melted because, the sun was shining too bright. You got too close to it, Icarus. Not
Those
your
were
wings.
good
Your head
days.
melted. You're dead now.
Those were good days.
Yeah, and I was like, this is an interesting medium, and I'm gonna bring it to. I'm gonna let them see it for the first time because it's kind of cool, seeing them get that experience for the first time and realizing that a book can almost play like a video game. And as we're going through it, they're taking stuff that they learned from previous lessons and they're like, okay, I can still see the act 1, act 2, act 3 structure happening throughout multiple choices, because we're mapping out like the directions that you can take on a choose your own adventure story. And it reinforces lessons that you've learned within your previous studies of a craft. And certain things turn out to be more true than you originally thought them. And it can inspire you to potentially even go in different directions. If you learn different techniques that apply to one style of storytelling, you might see if there's certain elements of them or lessons that you learned as you were going over those different methods of storytelling that can help you do screenwriting in a more creative way. Um, it's for me, it's like when I'm designing board games and I'm doing gameplay design, like I see the choices that one has to make in a game, and I think of like how that would manifest within a traditional story structure in a movie. It's a really good way to crack open a box if you feel like you've seen it all when it comes to like films, and maybe you've read Save the Cat one too many times and you're thinking everything's so formulaic, right? Or you get sort of despondent on that. It's like it's all the
Yeah.
same. Oh, Joseph Campbell, your vision is everywhere. Crack open a different medium. All right, it's like
Mm,
switching up your go-to beverage every once in a while. You might have a fun revelation that can
yeah.
influence what you do even better. I don't know. That's my last tip.
It's perfect. It's perfect. I love it. It's something that I've experienced both in screenwriting and in my former life as a music producer, which is actually what came to
Mm.
mind here. I would go so far down the rabbit hole of producing a certain style of track. Now, I was always into my electric, so it was trance, maybe some EDM, as they would call it now, lots of house.
Hmm.
And some of the best tracks I made were when I just took a walk one day and listened to something like classical
Yeah.
or funk or disco. I mean, disco kind of led to house music, so that's not really a
Yeah.
surprise. But you get these weird moments of, oh, that's a nice sound. I should bring that into this track. So it's not quite the same as what you're saying, but that's where my mind went with it. You can become tunnel visioned without really realizing it. And just stepping outside of what you're currently doing and experimenting with other genres in as you were saying, other mediums, it broadens your horizons, your creative horizons.
Absolutely.
I love it. That's great advice. And I think we'll stop it there because that's 7 plus 2 bonus tips. So, as we
Mm.
said, 9 in total. So,
Right.
listeners, you're welcome.
Hmm.
I'm sure we could do another hour. Maybe that's part 3 of our conversation here. So, we can scratch that itch one more time.
Sure.
In the meantime, Tom, where can people go to connect with you, find out more about what you do, what you're working on? Where can we send people?
Sure. You can hit me up on Instagram, slide into the DMs, as they say, at T Yungerberg on Instagram. You can also find like my profile pages on Coverfly and the ISA and Blacklist. I'm pretty sure those profiles are T Yungerberg, or you can just Google Thomas Yungerberg there. Um, or if you want to send me a direct email, I believe you can just hit up my email address, man. Hit it up,
Be
tyungerberg at
less nice.
gmail.com.
Be
I
less
don't care.
nice. Start
Yeah, be
emailing
less. Just
Tom.
just get aggressive. Just say, hey, what's going on, man? Heard you on that podcast. You're an idiot. Uh,
Your tips are
so
dog shit.
I'll be like, whoa, I didn't mean to mean that. Not nice. What the heck? No,
Damn it, John. You've given them bad advice. They're being
yeah.
too not nice.
Oh my gosh. Well, we reap what we sow. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's where you can find me. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from anybody who finds this fun or enlightening, or anyone who wants to just say you're full of crock. That's a crock of crap or something like that. That'd be pretty.
Any expletives, any combination of the above. We
Yeah.
accept it gladly because you know what? That means that the
Mhm.
community is engaging with the podcast. So we'll take it.
Oh
We'll take
man,
it.
I that it reminds me of like this one piece of feedback. So I when I had won, I got like the top comedy prize at the outstanding screenplay competition. I shared my success on like an online forum, and I was like, thanks guys. I like reading scripts in this community, and I thought I'd post this here, but I just want to thank you guys for, inspiring me, giving me feedback occasionally on things that I write. And I posted the screenplay, and this guy just ripped into me because in my dialogue, I had people saying like numbers. Like just like the symbol 4 was in a piece of dialogue, and he's like, "Do you want them to say the number 4?" Or why don't you write FOUR? It's a word. It's dialogue, you idiot. And I was like, this is what I come here for. This is so good.
You got them to pay attention. That's
Yeah, I
great.
was like, you're right, bro. You're right. You
Yeah.
got me.
Thanks for calling me out, and I hope you have a great life carrying that much rage with you.
I loved it. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody. and to hear from many of y'all. But thanks for having me on, John. I appreciate this. It's always a lot of fun.
It was a blast once again, and I'm sure there actually will be a part 3 in the coming months. So hopefully not too many nights staring at the ceiling this time. You know you're coming back.
I know. I get that 1,000-yard stare in my eyes as soon as I leave the meeting, and I'm like, it's just not the same, man. It's not the same. I get withdrawals. I got to come back.
Podcast withdrawals. All right, man. You take care of yourself. I'll see you soon.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode with the masterful Tom Yungerberg. I really hope you took something away from our top screenwriting tips. As we said, we're not experts, just trying to share a bit about what has been working for us. If you'd like more content just like this video, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also head to writeinthehead.org, where we have a screenwriting community you can join for free. We just need your email. We do not spam you. You just get one newsletter per week with some tips and tricks from this world of screenwriting. We will see you in the very next video, which should be appearing on your screens right about now.